In this Godot tutorial, I'll teach you how to make an experience bar with 3 different modes, and we'll make sure that it's hooked up to experience gained when you kill an enemy. Let's get started. So the first thing we have to do is we gotta make sure that we actually can get some experience when we kill an enemy. For that, we're gonna go over to George's script. George is our enemy in this game, and all the other enemies inherit from this script. This is part of the combat and the enemy logic series, but you don't have to have followed any of those tutorials to understand this piece. So the actual experience bar, encoding that, is sort of standalone. So you can keep following along even if you haven't seen any of my other tutorials yet. So what we're going to do for starters on the enemy, we're going to create a new variable called the experience pool. This will be the amount of experience that George and William and all the other enemies are able to give. Now I'm calling this experience pool on purpose because you might be implementing a party system in your game, at which point you probably want to use some sort of distribution function to determine which of your party members get which piece of the pie being the total pool, experience pool available. Now on this script there's a couple of functions, and one of them is the onHit function. This is basically when the enemy is hit. When the enemy is hit, we do a check if the current HP of the enemy is lower than 0. In other words, if the enemy has died, in which case we play the onDev function. Now of course we want the experience to be distributed to the player or the party when the enemy has died. So on the onDev function that's called after that verification, we can run an extra line of code. So we're not only going to turn off the collision shape and hide its HP bar and all that kind of stuff. We're also going to call the player. Player is a variable that's defined on the top here that is the actual reference to the kinematic body 2D of the player, where the player script resides. And we're going to run the function onKill, and we're going to push that experience pool to it. Now the onKill function doesn't exist yet on the player, so let's program that now. Now for the player and the onKill function, we're going to go over to the player script. On the player script, I've added these 3 variables. So now our player has a level, it has a current amount of experience, and it has a experience required. That will be the experience it needs before it levels. Now currently I got a hard code of 800 in here. You probably want to hook this up to some experience table kind of data, maybe in JSON format, that has stored all your thresholds when a player can level. Now with these 3 variables, I've added the onKill function right here. What we're going to do is we're going to be receiving that experience pool from the skeleton, and because I don't have a party system, I revert the name to experience gained. If you have a party system, you probably want to keep calling it experience pool, and you probably want to have the first couple of lines of code to be a distribution function to determine which of your party members gets which piece of that pie. Now what we're going to do is we're going to increase the experience with the experience gained. So on the first skeleton kill, we gave that an experience pool of 100. We currently have 650, so the first kill is going to be 750 experience. Now we're going to check if the experience is bigger than or equal than the experience required, which is not the case after the first kill, but it will be on the second kill. If we indeed level, if we have reached our experience required, we run the function level up, and we're going to deduct the experience required from the experience. We don't actually reset the experience back to 0 because we want that extra experience, that spillover, that 50 that was left after we've killed 2 skeletons, to already count towards the progression of the next level. So this makes sure that if we have indeed killed 2 skeletons, we got 850 experience, we reduce the experience with the experience required, that was 800, so we got 50 left. We're going to print those to see if this actually works before we actually program the experience bar. First though, we have a level up here. Now of course what we want to do with the level up, we want to make sure that we actually increase the level by 1. But this is also a good place where you might want to do some other things. You might want to release some skill points for the player to distribute, or some stat points to distribute, but you also could increase the base stats like HP for example. So that is the place where you would put those kind of functions. For now we're just going to increase the level with 1. With this code, we can play the game and we can walk around, kill these 2 skeletons. We'll do that real quick. And right here in the editor, you can see that we started out with 650 650 experience, level 7. First kill 750, still level 7. And then the second kill 50 experience towards level 9, because now we're level 8. So this function works properly. Now we got to make sure this all looks visually appealing towards the player in the graphical user interface to get the standard experience bar that fills up. Now for the experience bar, I have planned 3 different modes to give it a little bit of extra juice for your game. So the first mode is going to be the compact mode. That's where we take the experience bar and we slim it down so that the player has more screen space for the actual game world, having more overview. The second mode is going to be the percentage mode, where the experience bar will have a label with the percentage towards the next level, 80%, 90%, etc. And the third mode is going to be the value mode, which will demonstrate the real actual values. So for example, 650 out of 800 towards the next level. Now for the graphical user interface, first thing I'll do is I'll turn off this map so we can actually see what we're doing. We want this experience bar to be right here above the skill bar. For that, we're going to go to the graphical user interface and we'll add a new control node. And that control node will immediately rename to our experience bar. That experience bar, we want it to be a size of 500 by 30. Of course, I figured out all these sizes previous to this tutorial. Fiddle around with the sizes for your own game if you want it to be looking a little bit differently or need a different size. I'm going to center this to the bottom, but now I wanted to push it to the top. To do that easily, I'm going to set the vertical grow direction to the beginning. And then by giving it some margin, you'll see that we can very easily shift this element up. Minus 100 is, I think, the correct location. Then we're going to add another child and we're going to take an HBox container to organize the different elements that this experience bar is going to consist of, because we need both an indicator for the level as well as an indicator of the progress towards the next level. So we're going to take this HBox container and we're going to set its size to the full rectangle of its parent, which will be the experience bar we just set. Then we'll add a texture rectangle that will be the background for our level indicator, and we'll make that of size 45 by 30. We need it to be a little bit wider so it can handle a double digit for a double digit level, for example level 77, to name a random number. Now let's add that random number to the label right there so we can actually see what we're doing. First, we need to add a texture, and we'll set with expand on the same slot as we've used for the skill bar to be the texture of the level indicator. And with that, we can immediately see we need to make a couple of changes to this label. First of all, it needs to have a different layout. We need it to be full rectangle of the slot. We need to set the align horizontal and vertically to be in the center, and we need to change the font a little bit because this just looks way too small. So under custom fonts, we're going to go with a new dynamic font. By clicking on it, we get the options, we go to font, and on the font data we load our actual font data. Now that looks very rigid, so under settings we're going to use a filter to get the rough edges off there, and in the size we're going to go for a size 24. Now it's a little bit towards the top, so I'm going to give it just one piece of margin right here, and I think it's also a little bit towards the left, so let's also give that one margin there. Now that looks pretty good, pretty centered. Happy with that for this tutorial. Now we're going to go with a texture progress for the actual skill bar, and we'll also add a label to that. For the texture progress, we're going to go with a rectangle of 450 by what shall we say, 20, and resize that. Now as you can see, the texture bar is currently towards the top. We have to get that down in a moment. Let's first add the elements to it to make sure that it looks good and we can actually level it properly with the skill bar. I'm going to set 9 patch stretch on right there. It's very important. I'll demonstrate immediately why. I'll add this HP bar over to the over texture. And as you can see, it will stretch out these edges, and that's of course not really how we want this to look. So with this stretch, we can say how much of the image is allowed to be stretched. So we can sort of set an inner region and an outer region. And I think 4 does it very well there. And I'll also set the other side to 4, so that will be that side right there. And the top looks to be not stretched at all, and that's of course because of how the size of this bar works. So now we have the over texture of the bar. Now we also need to add the under texture and the progress texture. Now for me, those are always white bars because I like to work with the tinting within Godot. So for the tint of the under texture, we're going to go with a nice dark gray by 35, 35, 35, and I've set the value very quickly to 70 here so we can actually see the color of the bar and the color of the background. Now for the progress texture, let's just go with a sort of nice golden kind of yellowish, not too fancy. Yeah, that's good. That's like a nice neutral experience color. And like that, we also have to add a label. We already added a label. We're going to go with a full rectangle for the label. We're also going to set the align to center and center. And let's just say we'll have 65 experience in there. Now again, same here. We have to go to the custom fonts, make a new dynamic font. You could have saved a font as well. Now it's just 2 fonts I have to do, so I'm not too worried about it. Under the settings, we're going to set the filter on again. And now this looks a little bit too big, so let's make this one size smaller. And it looks like we need to give this a little bit of margin from the top and the other way. And like that, that looks pretty well centered to me. That's good enough for now. Now we're going to make sure that this experience bar is actually touching or hugging the skill bar. Now to do that, we can set its size flag, and currently it's set vertically to fill, but we can also set it to shrink. I can make this a little bit bigger, shrink to the end. And that's exactly what we need. If we do that, we automatically push the bar down towards the end, and the end is always to the right and to the bottom. Now with that done, this experience bar is now hugging the skill bar. All we may want to do is have a little bit of extra spacing there, because now they're just not equal. So we take this HBox container, we're going to set on the custom constraint separation on, and we're going to push this up until it touches the skill bar, which happens right there. Now with that, we got a nice margin or separation between the level and the bar, and all of it is looking good. Now all we got to do is hook this up to the code and make sure that those 3 different modes are actually functional. For the graphical user interface to update it properly, we have to do that in 2 moments. The first moment is when we load the game. We have to load all the player data inside that experience bar. And the second moment is whenever we get a kill. So let's split that up. Let's first work on that game load. We go to the script of the graphical user interface. This is where I handle all the elements on my graphical user interface and the behavior that they need to be showing. We got 2 new variables here. It's called experience bar and experience bar label. These are of course the experience bar itself, the texture progress, and the label inside the texture progress. Also take note that we have the player again here as a node reference stored in a variable called player. Now for the modes that I've been talking about, I created this variable experience bar state. Currently is in the value mode, but we can quite easily take the percentage mode and paste it in there, and we'll get a different mode. Now of course this is hard coded. What we're going to do in a future episode is we're going to program a game menu, so that when you hit escape you get an option called options, a button called options, and in there you'll get the possibility to change a couple of things. You know, maybe change difficulty, maybe change the graphics, change the sound, all that kind of stuff. But what we'll be working with is we're going to change the option of how the experience bar will look, and that is where we will code the actual switching between these states in a player friendly way. For now we're just going to go with percentage of value, doesn't really matter. Then under here, under the ready function, so that's when the game loads and the graphical user interface is finished loading, we're going to set the experience bar. There's a function I just created, and I've got it right here with only a pass. We're going to be pasting in the code here. Well, that's not the code. Quick cut. We're going to be pasting in the code here. So that is going to be this. Now it looks quite intimidating, but actually no. You can pretty much skip this entire match command for now. Let's first focus on the first 3 lines. First, we're going to get the node the texture rectangle label. So this is actually where we want to indicate the level, the current level of the player. And we set that equal to the set text string player level. Of course, we're just going to take the level out of the player script as an integer, got to turn it into a string because we're working with a label here, only accept strings, and that's how we update the player level. That's done. Now we are setting the experience bar, so that's the reference towards the texture progress. We set the maximum value to the experience required on the player script, and we set the value equal to the experience on the player script. These two lines basically make sure that the right amount of yellow texture is progressing towards the end. This basically updates the bar and all we need the bar to update. Then the match command is for the 3 different states that the experience bar state can be in. And this is basically handling what the label inside the texture progress should do. So when it's in compact mode, we want to hide the label altogether to make it as compact as possible. And that will give us the opportunity to reduce the bar size to 10 pixels instead of the 20 that we started out with. Now under percentage, it needs to of course show the label, as well as for value it should show the label. And for both percentage and value, we want that size to be 20. Now we gotta program this 20 as well, even though that is standard programmed in, because if a player during a single game session switches from percentage to compact and then from compact back to value, for example, we gotta make sure we update that size back to 20. Now for the percentage, we're going to take the player experience multiplied by 100 divided by the experience required under the player script, and we add under text, because it's a set text function and a string function, we add the space percentage symbol. For the value, we simply take the player experience, we add space / space, and we take the required experience. With that, when we play the game, we should be able to see an updated level indicator and experience bar, and so we do. We got level 7 and we got 81%, and if I were to quickly update from a value, percentage to a value, we would also be able to see that now we got 650 out of 800. We'll demonstrate the compact on the next play, so let's just put compact in there for now. Now what we got to do is we got to make sure that this experience bar updates properly, and also the level indicator updates properly whenever we get experience. So that'll be the final part of this tutorial. Now to update our experience bar whenever we get a kill, we first have to go to the player script. Under the player script, we got a variable on the top called graphical user interface, which is the node reference towards the graphical user interface node, or the canvas layer, and its script. Now right here under that onKill function we programmed early in this tutorial, we can replace these two prints, and now we can tell the graphical user interface to update us on any changes in the level and the experience. So we'll call the update experience bar function. That is a function that does not exist yet, but we'll code it in a moment. First, though, we have to make sure that the graphical user interface knows when we leveled, because when we leveled, it needs to update the level as well. So what we're going to be doing is we create a new variable on the top here. It's going to be leveled, which by default is going to be false. And if at any point this code was true, experience was indeed experience required, and we leveled up, we can say that then leveled is true. And we can push leveled to the update experience bar function that we'll be programming under the graphical user interface. That way we know what needs to happen at what point. Going back to the script of the graphical user interface, we can now paste the code right here. So this will be our update experience bar function. So let's go over what actually happens here. First of all, we check if leveled is actually true. If that is the case, we need to do two things. First, we have to set the experience bar maximum value to the player experience required. Remember, in this tutorial, we keep the experience required at 800 because we haven't linked it to an external experience table like you would probably do in a real game. Of course, if you're leveled up, in the player script, you would update the experience required to the experience required towards the next level. And that, of course, also means that the experience bar max value need to update to that value. Of course, we also have to get the label of the texture rectangle, that's the level indicator, and we're going to set that text to the player level, very similar to this function right here. Now else, so if the player did not level, you have to do nothing special because the rest of the code has to run anyway, whether leveled or not. Because in both cases, we have to set the value of the experience bar back again to the player experience, whether it has increased from 650 to 750 or it went from 750 back to 50 with a new level. In both cases, we want the experience bar to represent that, and in both cases it is stored under the experience variable under the player. Now, just like we do under the loading of the game, we have a match command which is going to determine what is going to happen. And basically these functions are exactly the same as the functions here under the match command, but of course they will be taking updated information from the player script, as experience will have, and as experience and experience required will have updated at this point. Now when I play the game and I kill these skeletons, we should be able to see ourselves level up. And there we go. Now we're level 8. Now we have 50 experience out of 800. And just like you said, we would test the compact version or the compact mode of this experience bar. And right now we've got a very sleek, nice experience bar, which takes very little space away from the actual screen that the player has. So the player can actually see more what's happening in the world. That was it for today, guys. Hope you like it. If you did, smash that like button, hit subscribe. Don't forget that little bell icon to make sure you don't miss out on the next video. Now, as I said, in this tutorial series, we'll be working on a player menu or a game menu with an option button where we can actually fiddle around with that compact value percentage state of the experience bar and actually have a player change it on the fly during its game session. That's going to be probably up for the next tutorial upcoming Friday. And as always, you can also find me on my Twitch stream. I stream every Tuesday and Thursday live on Twitch, my own game development. So if you ever feel like talking, asking any questions about Godot or game development, or you're just curious and hanging out with other game developers, you're more than welcome in the stream. Love to see you there. And until then, I'll see you next time. Keep on gaming, keep on coding. See you later, guys.